Lady Chatterley's Lover is the last novel by English author D.H. Lawrence, which was first published privately in 1928, in Italy, and in 1929, in France. An unexpurgated edition was not published openly in the United Kingdom until 1960, when it was the subject of a watershed obscenity trial against the publisher Penguin Books, which won the case and quickly sold 3 million copies. The book was also banned for obscenity in the United States, Canada, Australia, India and Japan. The book soon became notorious for its story of the physical and emotional relationship between a working-class man and an upper-class woman, its explicit descriptions of sex and its use of then unprintable four-letter words. David Herbert Lawrence, 11 September 1885 to the 2nd of March 1930, was an English writer, novelist, poet and essayist. His works reflect on modernity, industrialization, sexuality, emotional health, vitality, spontaneity and instinct. His best-known novels, Sons and Lovers, The Rainbow, Women in Love, and Lady Chatterley's Lover, notably concerned gay and lesbian relationships and were the subject of censorship trials. The story is said to have originated from certain events in Lawrence's own unhappy domestic life, and he took inspiration for the settings of the book from Nottinghamshire, where he grew up. According to some critics, the fling of Lady Adeline Morell with Tiger, a young stonemason who came to carve plinths for her garden statues, also influenced the story. Lawrence, who had once considered calling the novel John Thomas and Lady Jane in reference to the male and the female sex organs, made significant alterations to the text and story in the process of its composition. Lawrence allegedly read the manuscript of Maurice by E. M. Forster, which was published posthumously in 1971. That novel, although it is about a homosexual couple, also involves a gamekeeper becoming the lover of a member of the upper classes and influenced Lady Chatterley's Lover. The story concerns a young married woman, the former Constance Reed, Lady Chatterley, whose upper-class baronet husband, Sir Clifford Chatterley, described as a handsome, well-built man, is paralyzed from the waist down because of a Great War injury. Constance has an affair with the gamekeeper, Oliver Mellors. The class difference between the couple highlights a major motif of the novel. The central theme is Constance's realization that she cannot live with the mind alone. That realization stems from a heightened sexual experience that Constance has felt only with Mellors, suggesting that love requires the elements of both body and mind. Summary. Lady Chatterley's Lover begins by introducing Connie Reed, the female protagonist of the novel. She was raised as a cultured bohemian of the upper middle class, and was introduced to love affairs, intellectual and sexual liaisons, as a teenager. In 1917, at 23, she marries Clifford Chatterley, the scion of an aristocratic line. After a month's honeymoon, he is sent to war, and returns paralyzed from the waist down, impotent. After the war, Clifford becomes a successful writer, and many intellectuals flock to the Chatterley mansion, Rugby. Connie feels isolated, the vaunted intellectuals prove empty and bloodless, and she resorts to a brief and dissatisfying affair with a visiting playwright, Michaelis. Connie longs for real human contact, and falls into despair, as all men seem scared of true feelings and true passion. There is a growing distance between Connie and Clifford, who has retreated into the meaningless pursuit of success in his writing and in his obsession with coal mining, and towards whom Connie feels a deep physical aversion. A nurse, Mrs. Bolton, is hired to take care of the handicapped Clifford so that Connie can be more independent, and Clifford falls into a deep dependence on the nurse, his manhood fading into an infantile reliance. Lady Chatterley's Lover begins by introducing Connie Reed, the female protagonist of the novel. She was raised as a cultured bohemian of the upper middle class, and was introduced to love affairs, intellectual and sexual liaisons, as a teenager. In 1917, at 23, she marries Clifford Chatterley, the scion of an aristocratic line. After a month's honeymoon, he is sent to war, and returns paralyzed from the waist down, impotent. After the war, Clifford becomes a successful writer, and many intellectuals flock to the Chatterley mansion, Rugby. Connie feels isolated, the vaunted intellectuals prove empty and bloodless, and she resorts to a brief and dissatisfying affair with a visiting playwright, Michaelis. Connie longs for real human contact, and falls into despair, as all men seem scared of true feelings and true passion. There is a growing distance between Connie and Clifford, who has retreated into the meaningless pursuit of success in his writing and in his obsession with coal mining, and towards whom Connie feels a deep physical aversion. A nurse, Mrs. Bolton, is hired to take care of the handicapped Clifford so that Connie can be more independent, and Clifford falls into a deep dependence on the nurse, his manhood fading into an infantile reliance. Connie goes away to Venice for a vacation. While she is gone, Mellor's old wife returns, causing a scandal. Connie returns to find that Mellors has been fired as a result of the negative rumors spread about him by his resentful wife, against whom he has initiated divorce proceedings. Connie admits to Clifford that she is pregnant with Mellors' baby, but Clifford refuses to give her a divorce. The novel ends with Mellors working on a farm, waiting for his divorce, and Connie living with her sister, also waiting. The hope exists that, in the end, they will be together. Source: https://www.sparknotes.com/lit/Lady Chatterley/summary/. In Lady Chatterley's Lover, Lawrence comes full circle to argue once again for individual regeneration, which can be found only through the relationship between man and woman and, he sometimes asserts, man and man. Love and personal relationships are the threads that bind this novel together. Lawrence explores a wide range of different types of relationships. The reader sees the brutal, bullying relationship between Mellors and his wife, Bertha, who punishes him by preventing his pleasure. There is Tommy Dukes, who has no relationship because he cannot find a woman whom he both respects intellectually and finds desirable. There is also the perverse, maternal relationship that ultimately develops between Clifford and Mrs. Bolton, his caring nurse, after Constance has left. Mind and body. Richard Hoggart argues that the main subject of Lady Chatterley's Lover is not the explicit sexuality, which was the subject of much debate, but the search for integrity and wholeness. 7. Key to this integrity is cohesion between the mind and the body, for body without mind is brutish, mind without body is a running away from our double being. 8. Lady Chatterley's Lover focuses on the incoherence of living a life that is all mind, which Lawrence found to be particularly true among the young members of the aristocratic classes, as in his description of Constance's and her sister Hilda's tentative love affairs in their youth. So they had given the gift of themselves, each to the youth with whom she had the most subtle and intimate arguments. The arguments, the discussions were the great thing. The love-making and connection were only sort of primitive reversion and a bit of an anti-climax. The contrast between mind and body can be seen in the dissatisfaction each character experiences in their previous relationships, such as Constance's lack of intimacy with her husband, who is all mind, and Mellors's choice to live apart from his wife because of her brutish, sexual nature. The dissatisfactions lead them into a relationship that develops very slowly and is based upon tenderness, physical passion, and mutual respect. As the relationship between Lady Chatterley and Mellors builds, they learn more about the interrelation of the mind and the body. She learns that sex is more than a shameful and disappointing act, and he learns about the spiritual challenges that come from physical love. Jenny Turner maintained in The Sexual Imagination from Acker to Zola, a feminist companion 1993, that the publication of Lady Chatterley's Lover broke the taboo on explicit representations of sexual acts in British and North American literature. She described the novel as a book of great libertarian energy and heteroerotic beauty. Class. Lady Chatterley's Lover also presents some views on the early 20th century British social context. That is most evidently seen in the plot on the affair of an aristocratic woman Connie with a working-class man Mellors. That is heightened when Mellors adopts the local broad Derbyshire dialect, something he can slip into and out of. The critic and writer Mark Shorer writes of the forbidden love of a woman of relatively superior social situation who is drawn to an outsider, a man of a lower social rank or a foreigner. He considers that to be a familiar construction in Lawrence's works in which the woman either resists her impulse or yields to it. 12. Shorer believes that the two possibilities were embodied, respectively, in the situation into which Lawrence was born and that into which Lawrence married, which becomes a favorite topic in his work. There is a clear class divide between the inhabitants of Rugby and Tevershall that is bridged by the nurse Mrs. Bolton. Clifford is more self-assured in his position, but Connie is often thrown when the villagers treat her as a lady like when she has tea in the village. This is often made explicit in the narration such as here. Clifford Chatterley was more upper class than Connie. Connie was well-to-do intelligentsia, but he was aristocracy. Not the big sort, but still it. His father was a baronet, and his mother had been a viscount's daughter. There are also signs of dissatisfaction and resentment from the Tevershall coal pit colliers, whose fortunes are in decline, against Clifford, who owns the mines. Involved with hard, dangerous and health-threatening employment, the unionized and self-supporting pit village communities in Britain have been home to more pervasive class barriers than has been the case in other industries. For an example, see Chapter 2 of The Road to Wigan Pier by George Orwell. They were also centers of widespread nonconformism, non-Anglican Protestantism, which hold proscriptive views on sexual sins such as adultery. References to the concepts of anarchism, socialism, communism and capitalism permeate the book. Union strikes were also a constant preoccupation in Ragby Hall. Coal mining is a recurrent and familiar theme in Lawrence's life and writing because of his background, and it is prominent also in Sons and Lovers and Women in Love and short stories such as Odor of Chrysanthemums. Industrialization in nature. As in much of the rest of Lawrence's fiction, a key theme is the contrast between the vitality of nature and the mechanized monotony of mining and industrialism. Clifford wants to reinvigorate the mines with new technology and is out of touch with the natural world. 14. In contrast, Connie often appreciates the beauty of nature and sees the ugliness of the mines in Outhwaite. Her heightened sensual appreciation applies to both nature and her sexual relationship with Mellors. A publisher's note in the 2001 Random House Inc. edition of the novel states that Lawrence was unable to secure a commercial publication of the novel in its unexpurgated form. The author privately published the novel in 2,000 copies to his subscribers in England, the United States and France in 1928. Later that same year, the second edition was privately published in 200 copies. Then, pirated copies of the novel were made. An edition of the novel was published in Britain in 1932 by Martin Secker, 2 years after Lawrence's death. Reviewing it in The Observer, the journalist Gerald Gould noted that passages are necessarily omitted to which the author undoubtedly attached supreme psychological importance so great that he was willing to face obloquy and misunderstanding.